now turn to lesson 19, which is going to cover aorist participles. So last time we talked about participles in general and present participles. And so now we're turning to aorist participles. And the difference between them is in aspect. So turning back over here to our little playground here. So the orange here is representing the main verb. So here this would be, here I'm the speaker and I'm looking back in the past of an ongoing action. So this would be like, I was eating. That would be the main verb. But here, with the present participle, I'm giving something in the imperfective aspect, so the ongoing aspect. So we would say like while sitting at the table, something like that. So this sitting at the table, I was eating. That would be the present participle because we're using this imperfective aspect. The aorist, however, is we're going to use perfective aspect. And so it'll look something like this. So these are just out of the way. And often the aorist participle is talking about sequence. And so here, something happened that creates the background for the ongoing action of the main verb. So we would translate this as something like having sat at the table, or maybe after sitting at the table. So the act of sitting down is complete, is what this is communicating here with the aorist aspect. And so the aorist will kind of have a sequence. Something happened, and then that allows for the main verb to now continue, versus the present participle is going to emphasize some ongoing action that is happening at the time of the main verb. So going back here. So aorist participles, the form here that you can see it's the exact same as the present, where you see this new tau in the active, and you see the men in the middle passive. And even the endings are the same. So you can see in the active, we use third declension, first declension, third declension. So just like the present, 3, 1, 3. And then in the middle, sorry, I said passive, but middle participles, because passive is going to use the theta, like the indicative verbs. So we'll get to those. We'll get to those later. So, but middle participles use men, and then second declension, first declension, and then second declension in the neuter. So 2, 1, 2 in the middle, 3, 1, 3 in the active. So endings are all the same. And so there's nothing really new to learn, except rather than an omicron, you have a sa, which is what you'd expect with the aorist, is you have the sa. So the endings for the aorist shouldn't be too hard. And as there are second aorists, and just like in the imperative, the second aorist changes stem. It changes stem to the second aorist stem, and then it uses the present endings. So you can see here for horao, this is change the stem. It uses the aorist stem of adon, and then it uses the present endings. So no new endings, but you'll recognize the second aorist by the stem change, which you're used to. The second aorist doesn't have the sa. It changes stem and uses different endings. So that is what you would expect. So that is second aorist, active, and middle. Those are all the endings there. So no new endings, really. You just have to know how they fit. The newest thing that you'll have to learn, so the syntax, we talked about how it uses the perfective aspect, and so it often will have the sequence. Not always. This will get more complicated later on, and as we read more examples, you'll start to see just how the aorist participle works. The more difficult thing here that you are learning about is this last section called the genitive absolute. The genitive absolute. So the genitive absolute is used when you want to talk about something other, a participial phrase that is a different subject than the main phrase. So looking up here, these are just normal aorist participles. This is the typical use of a participle. So like here, saying these words, the prophet went out of the temple. So saying here, and this is aorist, so that's why it has when he had said, or maybe after he had said. This is nominative masculine singular, which reflects the nominative masculine singular subject of the main verb. And that's typically how participles work, is they will be in the same case and gender and number as the subject of the main verb of the sentence. However, what if you want to talk about a participle background, participial phrase background to the main verb, but not have the subject of the main verb be the action of the verb? Well, that's where you use the genitive absolute. So looking at these examples, you see leguses tes eunekos ta remata tauta. So here you have woman in the genitive and leguses in the genitive. And this is, so we translate this as while the woman was speaking these words, the child cried out. The child cried out. So here, the child is a different subject than who is doing the speaking of the participle. And so the participle and the woman are in the genitive, and that is the subject and action of the participial phrase, which is then different from the subject of the main phrase. And so we see that here again, like here, when the ruler had sat on the throne. So here, the ruler is the one doing the action of sitting, which is different from the main verb of the slaves brought. So here, hoi duloi eninkan. That's the main verb. But this, who's doing the participle is different. So we put the participle in the genitive. We put the subject of that participle in the genitive. So the ruler sitting. And then that's different from the main verb. And so that's the genitive absolute. Is if you want different subjects in the participle and the main clause, you need to use the genitive and the participle to distinguish between those. So this will become hopefully more clear. First, the difference between present and aorist and aspect, but then the use of the genitive as we go through exercises in class. So, all right, thanks for watching.